Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson, with Mage the Podcast, and I have a pair of distinguished guests joining me today in my virtual studio to discuss projects Mage and not Mage. The first is B. Dave Walters, a multifaceted and multi-talented participant in the world of RPG media and well beyond. He is the writer and co-creator of Electropunk, Dungeons & Dragons, A Darkened Wish for IDW Comics, creator and DM for the Darkened Wish stream show with Wizards of the Coast, Baron Victor Temple on Vampire the Masquerade LA by Night. I was going to include a joke about how you did every game in New York City except for Changeling, and then I found out you did a Changeling actual play. And
I did. It's true.
Yeah, I was going to make a joke about the Duchy of Floppy Pizza, but that's already been done. In addition to that, also joining is Tanya DePass, and a founder and director of I Need Diverse Games, a not-for-profit organization based in Chicago, which is dedicated to better diversification in all aspects of gaming. I rattled these things off very quickly. All of them will be in the show notes. B. Dave and Tanya, thank you so much for joining. We'll dive in with the World of Darkness angle. I first encountered a writing credit with the Agent's Dossier, the supplemental book for Technocracy Reloaded, which is important not just because it's a Technocracy book, but because it beat Cult of the Blood Gods, and I think that's the only reason why we're getting more Mage books. Mage fans don't have many dots in retainers, but we have dots and resources in Cult. So how did you get connected with Technocrat Project?
You know, I kind of think of myself as a reformed Akashic brother that learned the enlightenment of technocratic reason. I was just lucky to do it. I've been fortunate to work with Dawkins on a few things over the last couple of years. We were working on Werewolf for a little while before that project went a different direction, and it was right after Werewolf that he was like, hey, do you want to come work on this? And I was like, yes, I would. to get a chance to help sort of, I won't say bring the technocracy into the 21st century, but to put a different face on them and their motivation. Because even I'm running a technocracy stream as we speak. That's the 5th chapter of our New York game. We've already done Vampire, Werewolf, Mage, Wraith, or Changeling, and Wraith, and now we're doing Mage. And they chose technocrats, having never played Mage, when I explained them to them both sides of it. Because I was like, you guys have basically spent the last year making messes. Here's the cleanup crew, you know?
And I can't wait for your mummy chapter of that project. I know it's going to be huge.
All 17 people that remember Mummy are going to be like super pumped about that one.
I always wanted the Mage April Fools episode to be our continuing series of the Mage book reviews. That way we could be done in 2 years or 3 if we decided to include the LARP book.
I will say in my Patreon, because I ran about 35, 40 games a month for Patreon for about 18 months, and the mummies were a massive problem in that. But that was because they, you know, as they are wont to do. So that was a fun time.
When you have 7,000-year-old people running around with stamina 8, weird things can happen. They're like vampires, but they can be out during the daytime. So
basically,
it really complicates things. Introducing Mage to new players, what do you feel was the big attraction to the Technocracy? It seems to be a more and more common direction for both table play and for live stream and actual play versus the traditions, which was kind of the default for the longest time.
I just explain it to people as I'm like, Mage is the Matrix. And would you rather be Neo and his group, or would you want to be Agent Smith and his group? And then when they go down that binary, then I sort of explain all the rest of it to them. But I think most people between Men in Black, the X-Files, I think the appeal of now moving past the Technocracy being something other than NWO and hit marks, just black suited men that just show up and people vanish, which you still can play, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Realizing there's some subtext to that, and quite frankly, they're not wrong. The reality deviants are dangerous. The hemophagic entities are dangerous. Like, the humanity needs someone to protect them. And I think when you tell the story from that point of view, it resonates.
And one of the elements I think you did for the Agent's Dossier was the best group in the Technocracy objectively, and I'm saying this not just because I'm an actuary, but Cassandra Complex and the Friends of Courage.
Yes!
So Cassandra Complex, if I were to write down everything we'd gotten about them so far, it would comfortably fit on a cocktail napkin.
Agreed.
Likewise, Friends of Courage could probably fit on a matchbook. I know the text isn't out yet, but is there a general idea of the direction you decided to take those organizations? And what is it like writing essentially a conspiracy inside of a conspiracy inside of a conspiracy?
I wrote both of those two, and I wrote the Challenge Fate Foundation also.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a conspiracy within a conspiracy, and it very much is a group that you belong to without necessarily letting anybody else know that you belong to. Friends of Courage, in particular, very much leaned into the fact that it's like you don't know who the other Friends of Courage are, nor should you try and find out. Because if too many of you end up in one place, that's probably bad. Yeah, it was... I don't want to say too much, of course. It was just great to get to flesh out both of those modalities. And just the idea that, from a tonal place, and hopefully this is not going to get, laser beams from Onyx Path hit marks all over my face right now. But the tone of this book is very much like, hey, so we won. We got everything we wanted, and everything's still terrible. So,
Yeah, it's kind of the dog that caught the car.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all of these things are like, well, what does that mean now? And all three of my parts are essentially more of a can't we all just get along-ish approach. The Challenge Fate Foundation is like, well, maybe we should use science to help people. Yeah. And, maybe. And then Cassandra Complex, the same thing is, some of the, we're going to need some of these reality deviants to help us. So, and we can't just show up and be like, hey, we want to work together, because they won't believe us. So here's how we can kind of slow boat them. And it kind of balances out both bringing them over to a point of cooperation, but there's definitely also an element of it as make them our cat's paws,
Okay.
If we need to negate a reality deviant, that's cool. Maybe we just kind of sick these like unwitting kids on them. Kind of make sure they have a little, it's like, by the way, take this silver steak with you. Don't ask where it came from. And maybe go in that building right there and see what happens. And then Challenge Fate is the same thing. That it's like, to what extent has the Nephandic incursion become inescapable? To what extent is the shared awakening possible? Can the masses achieve enlightenment? And we're like, well, probably not our way, or we'd have done it by now. And if that's true, what does that mean? Yeah.
At current, the Technocracy kind of represents the closest thing that we have to a unelected police force in the world of darkness, and you now have characters that are bringing intense amount of power that has been arrogated to themselves because they think they are right and they are protecting something to them that is just and beautiful. That's a theme that's really easy to mess up and really step in it. Do you have any recommendations to storytellers who are trying to engage with those themes, especially through the Technocracy?
Don't shy away from it. Let them believe that they have these high ivory towers of ideals, and then twist it every way you can. Make everything they try to do come out terrible, because it's still the world of darkness. It is still, at the end of the day, storytelling games of personal horror. I mean, each of them have a slight twist on that, of course, but all things being equal, they are not stories of happy endings. They are not stories of shining knights. And you need to remind the characters of that. And I think a lot of that, it comes down to moral complexity, which a lot of these stories are at their best. That, if anything, that's the through line of all the World of Darkness supplements, is that moral complexity. I think it helps if you have, you represent the different technocratic factions, because obviously what an NWO person is going to want is different from a IDX person, is going to be different from Challenge Fate. Of to what extent are you trying to eradicate these opponents, and to what attempt are you attempting to bring them over to see the wisdom of your position? Because those are two different things. And back in my day, it was just agents and hit marks. Like the Technocracy is here. They're coming to kill everyone and probably going to succeed. So we should go. To have there be something other than that prominently, or at least attempting to have something other than that, I think is very interesting. And it also presents the opportunity for some order of reason conflict.
When we're trying to bring that conflict into our game, the World of Darkness attempts to be a world of moral grayness, where a lot of the other games that seem to be super popular right now are not. When I think of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition or Pathfinder or something like that, moral ambiguity doesn't come to top of mind. Do you think that interest in playing with those kind of very contemporary questions and questions of morality is holding back the World of Darkness in any way?
No, and I think we're gonna see a sharp uptick in Mage when the Matrix comes out. Like, I mean, Matrix 4. Like, you cannot convince me the Wachowskis didn't play Mage. Like, there's literally nothing they could do that would convince me that wasn't the case. I think, I've brought a lot of new people into these games, and Mage is tough in the sense that it is very crunchy. Once you get your head around the concept isn't difficult. The practical execution can be fairly challenging, especially when you play something like Werewolf, and it's like, hey, so turn into a werewolf and throw a truck at somebody, and you're like, all right. It's like, also you've got some gifts, so you can burst into flames while you throw a truck at somebody. It's like, cool. Whereas Mage is a whole other thing. I think Changeling is the heaviest in terms of lore in understanding the world, but Mage is the heaviest in terms of comprehending the mechanics. So that can be a challenge at times. But a buddy of mine who has the Mage spheres tattooed on his hands, that's how big of a fan he is. On his knuckles, he's got the spheres. He said multiple times, he's like, the logical flaw of the world of darkness is if all of these things really truly coexist, the technocracy wins. And that's true. Where you're like, I'm a werewolf, and it's like, you got silver blood now, that sucks. Like, I'm a Methuselah, the sun's out now, that sucks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah. So that's to be able to see what is rightfully an unstoppable force. I think the only way you tell that story is, you're right, no one stopped you, the plan worked, but it didn't. Now what?
Okay, so to you, the Technocracy is fundamentally about getting what you want and the problems that kind of fall out the other side of that, when maybe you haven't completely thought it through, or your initial model of the world was maybe too simplistic?
If anything, I think it's closer to being a parent, where you can have every intention and you can do everything to the best of your ability, and then the outcome is going to be what it is. And a lot of that is accepting the beauty and the individuality of that outcome, although the Technocracy is neither interested in beauty or individuality.
Yeah, its own kind of austere kind of beauty, seemingly. As you've mentioned, you've introduced a lot of people to Mage. If there are first-time storytellers who their friends see one of your live plays and go, oh geez, I want to do that. That looks super cool. What recommendations do you have to bring that excitement and turn it into a game quickly? Or alternatively, if you were asked to help with a Mage 5th edition, what would you want to change?
I would tell people, ease into the rules. In a lot of my streams, I go very easy on the paradox, because I do a lot of cross-splat play. And I encountered this, and we'd be playing games that, it's the mages have to jump through all of these hoops to manifest their effects and manage their paradox in a way that all the others don't. So ease into that. And I think once people get their head around the fact that you can do anything, there just may be repercussions. Like, my favorite description is always paradox is Jiminy Cricket with a chainsaw. Like, reality itself will fight back against you. And so the crazier of a thing you try to push, the harder you will get an equal and opposite reaction. And then that equal and opposite reaction may also manifest as some suited people showing up at your door.
Yeah. And if Paradox were to say, hey, we would like one more book to close out the 20th anniversary edition or something like that, do you feel that there are any game aids or materials or things that Mage could really use right now to try and reach out to that broader base?
A very simple introductory adventure, because there's all of the supplements and how do you do that and gods and monsters and all of that, but it's like there's the book, which is like a phone book. You could kill a horse with that book. And then there's other quick start guides, but they're not really like everything you need is still not in there. So having been like, you know what, here is a chronicle that you can play in like 4 sessions, from you've all awakened, you're already awakened, like each other, and action. That would be my suggestion.
Nice. Thank you so much for your input in that, and for being an unending ambassador for the world of darkness when it's this, in some ways, this weird relic that we're trying to figure out how to drag into 2021. And speaking of that, as I mentioned in the introduction, your work goes far beyond RPG media. I know you best as someone who has some fascinating tweets at around 11 p.m. my time informing me of whether or not chickens can swim. So that's why I come to that. In addition, a couple of months ago, you were doing a Indiegogo project called Dear America from a Black Guy. What was that project? Or what is?
It is still ongoing. Yeah, it's a documentary, and I just realized a couple years ago, because it's kind of been germinating, that one of the big problems we had is just we don't talk to each other. There's half of this country has othered the other half of the country, and we both do it. I'm just as guilty as this. I mean, I refer to them as flyover states. I'm from Arkansas. I think Arkansas is a flyover state. And there can be no real progress until we become cognizant of one another's basic humanity. It's like you and I may not agree on anything, but can we just start with you're a person and I'm a person? I got feelings, you got feelings. You know, both of us want, you know, roof over your head, food under your belly, hopefully your children better off than you, want to be safe. You know what I mean? Like that's, you know, can we just build off of the things that we do have in common? Because if we're never going to have any hope of fixing the big problems, if we lose sight of just that. So the point behind the documentary is looking at not only where we are and how we got here, but hopefully having a framework by which we can just have some meaningful conversations. And again, it is not some rose-colored can't we all just get along type thing, because it's been conclusively proven we cannot. It's still necessary to be able to at least have a shared vocabulary, because we're all on this ship together. And the extent to which we try and saw the ship in half to abandon those people, it's like, well, I got bad news for you, you know, because now we're going to sink too.
It's impressive the degree to which the history of enacting racism in the United States has been the process of white people shooting themselves in the foot, closing down community pools, cutting down community access programs because they didn't want them to have access to what have it. What would you say the audience for that project is?
Everybody. I mean, well, that would be, I mean, as a marketing guy, trying to appeal to everyone is the same as trying to appeal to no one. So I have a target demographic, but unfortunately, I think it's one of those things that the people that need to see it most won't watch it. Mm-hmm. But it is very easy to dismiss the Fox News viewers as being misinformed and gullible, but that didn't happen in a vacuum. And the reason why that level of ignorance perpetuates itself is because it is predicated on fear and divisiveness, and you being so afraid that they're coming for you, you know, in the extent that you have to understand. It's like, I mean, but we're not though. Yeah, I'm like, we don't want to be in Nebraska, or we would be. Like, it's there now. Like, we all know where it is. We're not interested, you know, like nobody's coming to take your farm, man. Like, everybody just wants peace and safety, and healthcare and education would be great, you know, but I mean, I truly believe in my heart, not just as human beings in general, but Americans even specifically, we really have more in common than we don't. We really agree on more than we don't. And the zealots are at the fringes. And I think a lot of times we get overly preoccupied with the loud fringe minority and lose track of the fact that for the most part, a lot of us are on the same page about a lot of things and trying to build off of that.
Thank you for sharing that. If people are interested in following that project, is that something that people can still jump in on, or do we just wait until the final thing comes out?
You sure can. If you go to my Twitter, @BDaveWalters, there's a pinned post right at the top with a link to the documentary and my graphic novel project. You can check either one. I'd appreciate any and all signal boosts, and you absolutely can still back the process because it's still in motion. It has shifted radically twice already, because pending how the election had gone, it was going to be a very different documentary.
Yeah.
And then after January 6th, it became a very different documentary, you know, so it's trying to be agile with the times here. Yeah.
Once again, I'd like to reintroduce Tanya, one of the lead developers for the Into the Motherlands project, which is this, what to me appeared to be an Afrofuturist RPG plus media streaming combo experience that is now going into, I think it was listed as the second season. What is the Into the Motherlands project?
Well, the Into the Motherlands is twofold, but B-Dave is our lead developer. I'm the creator and creative director. So it is an Afrofuturist sci-fi RPG. It's a brand new IP. It's a brand new setting. It came out of the brain meats after B-Dave and I knew that we'd have this opportunity to get funding from Twitch for the stream show. So the stream show is in its second season, but we knew that we were going to put out a book. We knew from day one that this was not just going to be an actual play show. It was going to be, eventually people will have the Motherlands book in their hand. And so we created this world, we created this setting that is free from colonialism and slavery. And we created a world where we had to go back to the 14th century to pluck people that have never been encumbered, because I keep wanting to say shackle, but I'm like, that's a terrible wordplay, by colonialism and slavery. And also for the one smartass who asked, oh, didn't Mansa Musa be part of the slave trade? He was dead before the Atlantic slave trade. So you should pick up a history book. But we couldn't pluck people from the modern day and say, okay, we've had enough, we're leaving Earth, because we all have dealt with colonialism and slavery and everything else. So we went back, got the actual expedition that he did send off that, historically just was never found again. But we said, hey, here's all these people that they just timey-wimey, they got there, because I don't know that mechanism, because I'm also on the show, so I'm trying to keep that thin veil of not getting spoiled, but also being the developer. We wanted the world that we wish we'd seen when we were younger, and I probably have butchered that entirely because I've been talking all day, so I will leave that to B Dave to clean up for me, because I have a hard time with words right now.
No, you hit it all. At the end of the day, all of these stories are about having a world that you would want to go and get lost in, having a world that you would want to be a part of. And we're trying to paint that picture of that. That is one of our guiding principles, was just asking, what's the game that 10-year-old you needed? What was the representation that you required? Because everybody needs to see themselves reflected in these media, both as hero and as villain, to have something to aspire to and away from, and be able to put on those different masks for themselves. I think, to continue with the World of Darkness thing, I think a lot of the strength of the World of Darkness is it says something about this modern world, because it is this world. The store that's over there is over there. That mall is there. Like there might be some slua down in the sewers underneath, that have an uneasy alliance with the Nosferatu, but it's the Galleria. For this, we're doing something very different in making our statements about the world and our place in it by the setting that we're painted, and even things like the mechanics. Like, there is no attribute system. It is all based on skills and values. It is what is your characters personally good at and what's important to them, because we didn't want race-based stat adjustments, because what tends to come up in that sort of thing is the fair-skinned people tend to be the smarter, wiser ones, and the darker-skinned people tend to be the strong, brutish ones, usually, not always. And those are things that we didn't want to perpetuate. One of our alien species, the Hyanol, are a hyenid race that look like anthropomorphic hyenas, and you're like, oh, they must be monsters and killers. It's like, actually, they're not. They're engineers and philosophers. We try and subvert all of those expectations at every turn, and it was woven into the very fabric of the game and the experience that be how it is.
And hyenas are also notable for being one of two species that is capable of cat loafing besides the domestic cat, so that's kind of an important thing to get in there.
Important.
So this is based on essentially an alternate history that the Western expedition sent out by Mansa Musa in, what was it, the 14th
century, yeah, something like that,
into the Atlantic Ocean. Yep. Never arrived. And
right.
You were taking that as your starting point, and those people went somewhere else. That expedition never arrived. What is that
right.
other place? Because my immediate thought here as a mage player is, anytime we now have a weird phenomenon that can happen in the world that is magical, it can happen again. And also, that just screams Umbral Realm to me, or some sort of tear in the horizon.
In this case, they were transported to another physical planet far away. And by the time our game starts, another 2,000 years have passed. So they have fully integrated into this society, and other cultures have risen up from this. There's been a very interesting thought experiment of, if placed in this environment, what kind of survival strategies would people engage in? And there are the people, Musalians, that are identifiably biologically human. Like, if you took a DNA test, they're like us. There's the Hyanol, like I said, the hyenids. There's Monsagene, which are cyborgs that have gone so far as they're essentially sentient AIs now. Like, they might not even be human in the way that we think of it anymore. The Solansi, that are human plant hybrids that have completely enmeshed themselves in the natural world. there's another culture that has become symbiotic with another indigenous kind of energetic species, the Mesagi, that they're now, you know, greater than the sum of their parts. And there's going to be some other ones, and we referred to that expressly as cultures, not races, because I think a lot of times people think people of color are a monolith, and we're not. Not all brown people are the same. Not all black people are the same. And we even get that even in Eurocentric fantasy, where you're like, well, this is what the elves are like. And you're like, are you sure? All of them? Have you asked? You know? Yeah. He's like, this is how dwarves are. And you're like, really? And you're like, well, there's some evil ones that live underground. Oh, okay. You know, trying to get a little more nuance in there.
Oh, yeah. It's like in sci-fi where everyone on a planet wears the exact same clothes. You're like, okay,
exactly.
This is a convenient shorthand.
Well, and even though, you know, Star Trek has been a bit of a touchstone for us, you know, in a legally distinct way, in the sense that, you know, it is a bright future driven by exploration and not, you know, desperation or greed or conquest. Mm-hmm. A lot of times in Star Trek, what you see is societies being advanced is equal with them being homogenous. That's one of the founding principles before you can even get into the Federation, is, you know, your world unity or whatever, everyone being the same. That's not necessarily what I hope for in the future. The diversity of our world and our cultures is a beautiful thing. What we need is equality, not everybody being homogenous.
So I, as someone who does not have the same cultural touchstones that would make sense for this game for me, just out of the box, these are pulling on maybe cultural references that I'm not familiar with. Do you have any recommendations for me as a white guy on how to approach this game and make it a fulfilling experience for me and to do it justice?
Open the box and play it. This is an all-new IP. There's no cultural touchstone for anyone specifically to get. Yes, the team that's making it is all Black and people of color. And yes, we've heavily put in references to Black and POC culture, and everyone on the team has contributed something from their own culture and background. But here's the thing, and this is going to sound mercenary, and Dave will probably laugh. We like money. We're not going to tell you, oh, you're white, you can't play the game, unless you want to be out here and make a caricature versus a character. But there is nothing stopping anyone white from picking up this game and playing it once it's in your hands. What we want people to do, though, is to be respectful. And just like with D&D, if I say I'm going to make my character a Black human, cool. If you're not a Black human in real life, but can you do that without relying on tropes and stereotypes and making them a caricature of some step and fetch it that doesn't know how to read, they're ignorant, they're dark skinned and stupid or whatever. And also, most of the humans are going to be Musalians, and this is 2,000 to 3,000 years after the time they have landed on this planet. So there's a whole brand new, freshly raked sandbox for everyone to play in. I did a stream the day after we announced the stream. I did a personal stream on my channel and talked about it, and someone really said, well, I'm white, can I play the game? And I was like, will you have money to go buy the game when it's out? That is the question. Because nothing about this game should be alienating to anyone. If you can sit down and play this game and enjoy it, that's the end product. Because we're not making this as some object lesson. We're not making this as, I played this game, now I understand Black issues. No, don't do that. But we are very intentional in the people that were picked to write the game and the people that are on the stream every week. And we are creating joy. We are creating something that is for us, and we are bringing it to other people, because all the stories that get attention from Black and brown creators are always stories of tragedy and woe and 12 Years a Slave and the Green Book and the Green Mile and all this other stuff. We laugh and joke, we enjoy ourselves on the show and telling the stories, and that's what we want people to pick up this book and do. There is no, as a white person, here's how you don't fumble, because B-Dave or I are not going to materialize behind you when you have this book and go, no, you're a terrible racist, you did it wrong. But think about what you're doing. If you've seen the stream, if you read the book in the foreword, and we're going to address it in the intro to the game as well, as long as you are respectfully playing the character and not creating some terrible tropey stereotype caricature, that's all we can ask. But we also can't control what people do once they get the book in their hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this came up a lot around Black Panther time, where I'd have white friends of mine that were like, is it okay if my kids dress up like, like black characters from Black Panther? And I'm like, absolutely. You know why? Because little black kids can dress up like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. Like joy and wonder is here for everybody. And anyone who attempted to even say that you're not allowed to, or to gatekeep that, I'd be like, hey, so check this out. We're also not elves and dwarves and halflings and orcs and bugbears. You know what I mean? Like we take on these roles all the time anyway. Of course, come play and have fun.
Recent Kickstarter, Coyote and Crow, did well, to understate it. And one of the things that game includes is some recommendations for tropes to avoid and ways you can accidentally step in it, as it were. This game is a new sandbox. It's a new open place. What tools come in that box? So I backed the Kickstarter. I got my deluxe copy. What in there is going to help me navigate through it? Is it something where I get 200 pages of rich information about culture and background and so on? What tools help me start that first game in this setting?
It is going to be a full and complete TTRPG from start to finish. Everything you need to play. The rules, the setting, the context, everything. We'll have some safety and consent tools in there just because I think that's just responsible storytelling. Yeah. But at the end of the day,
it's going to be a whole book.
Okay.
And B. Dave is writing extra content for the deluxe edition, but it's all going to be one book. So let's just squash this. There is no separate rules. There are no separate setting and lore. It is a complete TTRPG you are going to get at the end of this Kickstarter.
Yeah. Yeah, everything you need will be in there. About the cultures, the locations. Again, there is a deluxe edition. Yeah, everything you need can be great. And honestly, as we continue to unlock stretch goals, that's probably what the stretch goals are going to manifest as, is more content. Okay. To just, make the book bigger and bigger. Not Mage 20 herniated back bigger, but just bigger.
Call that one the Widowmaker. A lot of trees died for that Kickstarter.
A lot of trees died for that Kickstarter. Yeah, man. It's not a table weight, it's a table.
It was kind of funny. I was talking with one of the devs for Exalted, and I'm like, this book is pretty streamlined. They're like, no one has said that. And someone's like, he plays mage. They're like, yeah. As happens. Yup. As far as developing novel cultures, what is it like building with that canvas where you do not start with the presumption that the interactions between cultures are going to be fundamentally colonialist?
A mistake we've heard some people making is assuming that without colonialism, there's no conflict. And that's not true. I mean, you still can compete over resources. You still can compete over ideologies, you perhaps violently. There's still plenty of things to fight over. It is just not a Eurocentric manifest destiny expansionist reason to fight. Like, we are not warring over you because we feel like we're chosen by God and are better than you. So again, like I was saying previously, it's been a thought experiment of what are the various ways that these cultures would develop free from some of the things that, crushed and perverted cultures on Earth. What do those expressions look like? And it's been good because, all the way up to when the stream started, all the way up to when Abria's character joined, we were still adding professions to the list. That's one of the first conversations we had with people. It's like, here's some professions that we've kind of, sketched out, but just what seems dope, and we'll make it for you. I sat down with her and she's like, well, I kind of have an engineer in mind and I'd like her to be good at these things. And I was like, can do, and made it for her. So that's been very liberating because we've all worked on a lot of games, and, a lot of times you have your style guide and everything, and the walls are high and thick of what you can and can't do. We don't have that. We have some guiding tonal principles that we have been guided by, but down the details of it, especially when you're talking about a universe with many worlds in it, we can make almost anything make sense somewhere. So it's been it's really been an opportunity to let all the collaborators and contributors to just really let their emotions loose.
So this will be able to bring in just about any story that one associates with science fiction, the complications of technologies, the difficulties of getting disparate cultures to cooperate, problems with research management, what it means to be human, and so on. Do you feel?
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, again, to me, the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek, which I love deeply, but differently, is, Star Wars is a world where evil is winning. good is on its heels. Good is always on its heels. In the moment that you think good is winning, then a lot of internalized corruption comes up, and then, oh, wait, here's bad back again. You know, that it's the struggle of the light is Star Wars. Star Trek is hopeful exploration in a better future. Like, they're leading fundamentally good lives on the Enterprise. Like, they have problems, they solve their problems, and they keep rolling. Like, they're all out there because they want to be and see what's around the next corner. That is more, in a legally distinct manner, the vibe that we're after. That you're going new places and seeing new things because you want to, and you will encounter various entities along the way that may or may not want you there, and then things go where they go.
One of the things about that Star Trek-like setting is the idea of getting to be really competent at things. Is this a game where you can kind of do competence porn? Like, if I've played 4 or 5 sessions, what is that cool thing that I can tell my RPG friends that I did during a session? Kind of like the analog of, oh, I learned this level 5 spell, or I mastered this new sphere. Are there any things like that that just create spectacular tableaus of ability and competence in the game?
There are. So currently, the way the version of the game that's being played on the stream is primed by Cortex. We're using the Cortex system. The final version of the book we put out may or may not use Cortex. We're blessed to have a lot of options, up to and including creating an all new system. So we're going to have to decide what's the best way to manifest that. But in Cortex, with the current version, is you have things called story points. And it is akin to the storyteller system, not exactly, where you can cash in these story points to plot points, rather. You can cash in these plot points to do dramatic things. And each of the professions have their own talents that are powered by these plot points. So as you've accumulated these, largely through role play is how you encounter them, you essentially are almost powering up your meter for all intents and purposes until you can unleash this cool thing. Like for the Blade Keeper, the kind of character that Tanya plays, one of the things you can do, there's one where you can always go first, like always win initiative no matter what. One where you can block any attack no matter what. Anything coming at you, you will defend against. And narratively, if that's the kind of thing where you wedge yourself in the hallway while everybody else is leaving and then activate that, that's going to be pretty cool.
And looking over the professions of the Motherland, they're pretty badass. The Lightbringer, combat medic that channels their power through a sword or fist. I think we need more punchy medics in the world. I think that's a good thing. Biopriest, android high priest healer that works with the techno deities. What are some of the things that you feel that World of Darkness people can just look through this for inspiration and try and bring into their own games? As Mage players, we have access to the Umbra. We can bring in time travel. We have Everett volumes that let us kind of switch to parallel realities. Is there anything that a World of Darkness player could look to this for as a source of ideas or inspiration?
I would say, even though ours is a far future sci-fi book, but the high technology is a component of Mage, I would say more than anything is to bring in Black excellence, POC. I mean, not just the one African subgroup. Show some different kinds of people prominently. You want to take something from this, take that from it. Honor different kinds of cultural representation. I mean, I could get into more minutia, but I think it's more of that. Challenge your own assumptions. Challenge your assumptions. If you wish to do an honor to the Baron of the Valley, that would be my request, is that. Yeah.
Awesome. And I have peppered you with questions over the last almost 50 minutes. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to convey, either about Into the Motherlands, your experience in the RPG world, or anything you think our listeners should be aware of? Any other creator you'd like our listeners to know about that I can throw in the show notes, either Tanya or B. Dave?
I'm going to pass that to Tanya. I've said too much.
Basically that, remember this is new, but also remember that all of us working on this are more than competent. And what you're getting is a culmination of decades of experience. And folks that, we recommend you listen to is everyone involved with this project, everyone that B. Dave has worked with. I mean, just now, while we're chatting, Abria and Christina are having the most amazing love fest of appreciation in tweets, started by a GIF shared by Christina from the show. Remember that we're here, and soon being next year, you too can run around on Votoa.
And for more information, go to motherlandsrpg.com. That link will be in the show notes. That also has a link to the Kickstarter and all of the contact information and social media presences for the amazing creative team behind this. Tanya, B-Dave, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Check out the Kickstarter if you can. If you can, back it. If it's not within your means to do so, please signal boost. We will take it all.
This has been Mage the Podcast, who bet big on Dante Coin and lost its shirt, so I guess we're going to have to do this podcasting thing a good bit longer. Our ill-thought-out venture in crypto was supported by Josh H., John Magnuson, Jenna F., John H., Chris Zach, William M., Neil Patterson, Christopher P., Buck Farmer, Anders S., Brendan, Dan Svensson, Jay Sunsern, Andrew E., William C., Isabella Castillo, Josh Golden, Michael Creedle, Freddie, Richard Bat Brewster, Bryce Perry, Andy, and Michael Parker. Our executive producer shout-out this week is to Josh H., who I think is Canadian, and I'd simply like to share that one of my life goals is to cover the entirety of the main route of the Trans-Canada Highway. It goes from British Columbia to Newfoundland and Labrador and covers the territories if you count the unsigned sections, which I really don't. It spans about 4,860 miles overall, or a mere 1,840 on the route I'd like to cover. What's interesting to me is the terminus in Victoria has a mile 0 monument, and the terminus in St. John's has a mile 1 marker, making it a roughly 1,860 mile. If you'd like to become an executive producer like Josh H., get a chat color in Discord and have me make up something about you periodically, as well as receive our executive producer-only podcast, So What You Playin'? You can become one by clicking on Become a Supporter in the show notes or through the episode entries on our webpage. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on Twitter. We have a hop-in Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. You can subscribe to our show on Spotify, Anchor, TuneIn, iTunes, Google Play Podcasts, or the podcatcher of your choice. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also, go to Mage the Podcast for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now, go change reality. Bye.